Hi everybody, I'm here in Salzburg today. Salzburg is one of the most beautiful cities in Austria and perhaps in all of Europe. And we're going to check out Salzburg together. Hi and welcome to Salzburg, maybe Austria's most famous city after Vienna. Today I'm going on a walking tour through this magical and romantic city which serves as the perfect gateway to the Alps. Along the way I will give you some hopefully useful ideas on what to see in Salzburg. Make sure you watch to the end, where I will provide some additional tips and answers to questions you may have. Let's check it out. Salzburg is the fourth largest city in Austria and is located about 150 kilometers, about 93 miles southeast from Munich, and about 300 kilometers or 186 miles west of Vienna. Salzburg's historic center, in German the Altstadt, is known for its Baroque architecture and is one of the best preserved city centers north of the Alps. It has a whopping 27 churches and is dominated by the massive Hohensalzberg fortress. Salzburg is also listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Tourists and travelers usually come to Salzburg to tour the historic center and the scenic alpine surroundings. So when you come to Salzburg, make sure you also check out the amazing little alpine towns and villages in close proximity such as Hallstatt, Bad Ischl, St. Gilgen, St. Wolfgang, Gosau and Zell am See. So what is Salzburg known for and why is it such a favorite with tourists? Well, Salzburg is of course known as the birthplace of the 18th century composer Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Because of its history, culture and attractions, Salzburg has been labeled Austria's most inspiring city. Geographically, Salzburg sits on the banks of the river Salzach at the northern boundaries of the Alps. The mountains to Salzburg's south contrast with the rolling plains and hills to the north. The closest alpine peak, the almost 2,000-meter high Untersberg, is less than 16 kilometers, or about 10 miles, away from the city center. This area is flanked by two smaller hills, the Mönchsberg and the Kapuzinerberg. Interestingly, and as a fun fact, Salzburg has about the same latitude as Seattle. What makes Salzburg such a great city to explore is that it's probably one of the most walkable cities you can find. Everything is in close proximity and you won't have to cover large distances between the various sightseeing landmarks. So let's start our travel walking tour through Salzburg at the Mirabell Palace. If you come by train, the Mirabell Palace is only a short 10-minute walk away from the train station. You can also find parking garages and even street parking in this area. From Mirabell, we will take a walk through the old town of Salzburg and finish our tour at the Hohensalzberg Castle. The palace was built in 1606 on the shore of the Salzach River north of the medieval city walls, at the wish of Prince Archbishop Reichenau, who had had a stroke the year before. He decided to build the Mirabell as a pleasure palace for him and his mistress. Allegedly, it was built within 6 months after Italian and French models, but looking at the palace, I'm not sure that is even possible. When Reichenau was deposed and arrested at Hohensalzberg Castle in 1612, his successor Mark Sittig expelled his mistress and her family from the castle. Sittig gave the palace its current name from Italian, Mirabile Bella, which stands for amazing or beautiful, wonderful. It was rebuilt in a lavish Baroque style in the early 1700s. It features a beautiful garden designed in a geometrical layout with mythology-themed statues and sculptures of Hercules, Paris and Pluto, created by Italian sculptor Ottavio Mosto in 1690. It's one of the most popular tourist attractions of Salzburg and invites for some great pictures. Some may know the garden and fountain also from the Sound of Music musical. The Mirabell Palace and its gardens are listed as a cultural heritage monument. When you are there, don't miss the Zwergel Garden, the Gnome Garden, a small extension to the main garden with a peculiar collection of bizarre gnome sculptures created in the early 1700s. Take a rest on the park benches and soak in the atmosphere under the large trees, which provide great shade on a hot summer day. My next stop is the famous Market Stake, a pedestrian bridge over the river Salzach. The bridge features a sea of padlocks, so-called lovers' locks, that couples put up on the rails of the bridge, lock it up, and throw away the key in the Salzach River. It's quite a romantic place, but besides that, it also offers great views of the Salzach River and Salzburg's old town just behind. Now, on the other side of the river, enter the old town, where another major attraction in Salzburg is right in front of you: Mozart's birthplace at number 9 Getreidegasse. Mozart was born here on January 27 in 1756. It's now a museum and introduces visitors to the early life of the composer and his first musical instruments, such as his childhood violin and the clavichord on which he composed the magic flute. Mozart's parents rented an apartment on the third floor of the simple but nicely restored 12th century townhouse. I didn't go in this time, as I had already visited the place at previous visits to Salzburg, but I recommend you check it out, especially if you are into music. It's open from 10 a.m. to 3:30 p.m., but note it's not wheelchair accessible. Entrance is €12 per person, but I believe children pay less. Guided tours are available but cost extra and need to be booked 2 weeks in advance. I don't think they're needed though, as there are lots of descriptions everywhere and a pocket guide provides detailed explanations too. Now that you're already at Getreidegasse, the grain lane, take a stroll along the picturesque medieval-looking street that is lined with stylish shops and interrupted by small alleyways, passageways and courtyards. Getreidegasse runs parallel to the Salzach River and today is part of a large pedestrian zone in the Old Town Quarter. First mentioned in 1150, it's definitely one of Salzburg's most popular tourist attractions and not to be missed. At the end of the lane, make a left where you can visit the toy museum or pass it to enter the Universitätsplatz, another small lane that runs parallel to Getreidegasse. This leads you to a nice square, University Square, at which you can visit the Catholic Church Kollegenkirche. The church is quite remarkable and known for its Baroque interior dating back to the early 1700s. It's the least visited of the major churches in Salzburg and usually very quiet. Enjoy the serene atmosphere of the place before you head back out to continue the tour. Now you can either head straight towards the Salzburg residence or take one of the small passageways back to Getreidegasse, where you go past the Mozart birthplace into Judengasse or Jews Lane. Today is Sunday here, so many of the shops are actually closed, but it's actually quite nice because that way you can really just stroll through the city and it's not too crowded. The weather's quite nice, it's not too hot, not too cold, just perfect. There's a nice sun and a nice breeze here, just the way you want it. When you come to Salzburg, you definitely have to get some Mozartkugeln. Mozartkugeln are the chocolate balls that you can find almost in any store here. They're quite famous and they're really delicious. Salzburg is really a medieval city and there's lots of these small alleyways that you can explore. Lots of little stores in there and you can just go into any of these alleyways and check out what's in display. I imagine it's quite nice to do shopping here, although things are closed today. But really lots of traditional stores. That ice work, a nice ice store. I'm just gonna check out one of these alleyways here. You can see, I mean, this stuff is super old. These buildings must have been built about 1,000 years ago. I don't know. Check that out. Make a right at Goldgasse, which will lead you to the Residenzplatz, probably the most prominent square in Salzburg's old town. You will have the Salzburg Dome right in front of you, the Residence Gallery to the right, and the Salzburg Residence Palace, Museum and Clock Tower to the left. Every day at 7 am, 11 am and 6 pm, you can hear the sound of 35 different bells ringing. If you have the time, take a seat in one of the cafes for a while and listen to the music. Otherwise, check out the impressive Salzburg Cathedral with its opulent early Baroque style exterior and interior. Salzburg Cathedral stands at the site where a church has existed since the 8th century, although the present was built in the 12th century. Even if you're not Catholic, you cannot help but being impressed by this majestic architectural masterpiece. When you exit the cathedral, you can either go left, the most direct way to the fortress Hohensalzberg, passing the sphere sculpture of a man on a golden sphere, created by Stefan Balkenol in 2007. Alternatively, take a right back to the Residenzplatz, which leads into the Mozart Square with a nice statue of the famous composer. Make a right and follow Kaigasse, where you will likely have several horse carriages pass you. Make another right into Herrengasse, which leads into Bierjodelgasse, from where you can take the Nonnberggasse, which you can follow all the way back to Festungsgasse up the Mönchsberg to the fortress Hohensalzberg. I know, it sounds like a lot of little alleyways, and it indeed is. But allow yourself to get lost a bit and just explore the side streets of this beautiful old town. If you don't feel like walking up the steep hill, you can also take the funicular up the mountain. I, however, walked up and took the funicular back down. The one-way ticket is included in the entrance fee to the castle. The ticket costs €10.30 for a package that includes the castle area, courtyards and chapel, the panorama tower, the fortress museum, marionette museum, military museum, and the funicular to go back down. For an additional €2.30, you can also add the princely chambers and magic theater. If you want to take the return trip with the funicular, just add another €2.50 for a total of €12.80. The museums are quite informative, and you can easily spend 2 hours up here wandering around the fortress. The views from up here are breathtaking. You have an amazing view down to Salzburg on the one side, and over the Salzach Valley with the Alpine mountain panorama on the other side. Coming up here is definitely not to be missed. So I'm here at the Glockenturm right now at the Hohensalzberg, and it's amazing. It's definitely something you have to check out. Look at the view behind me. You get the view of all of Salzburg with the Salzach in the background, and it's just spectacular. Definitely something you want to check out. By now you're probably quite tired, so why not take a break in one of the many cafes and restaurants in the city. Austrian food is delicious, and you definitely want to have some while you're here. A few more tips and answers to questions international travelers may have in Salzburg. When is the best time to visit Salzburg? Well, if you have a choice, I recommend you come in June or September. That way you avoid the larger crowds in the high season in July and August. But even the summer is beautiful in Salzburg. And there are always ways to avoid the big crowds by coming to places early or venture out to see things a bit off the beaten path. I'd avoid the months of March, April and November, as the weather will likely not be that great and it can get quite cold there too. Is Salzburg a safe city? Absolutely yes. Austria is generally a very safe country and Salzburg is no exception to that. I would say the standard common sense precautions do apply for travelers as they would in any other large city. How expensive is Salzburg? Well, travel budgets vary depending on your style of travel. Plan to spend around €100 or about $120 per day on your vacation in Salzburg. That's the average daily amount for expenses based on the expenses of other visitors. Calculate with about €23 or $28 on meals per day and about €10 or $12 on local transportation. Needless to say, these amounts can vary quite a bit. All in all, Austria is generally much cheaper than, for example, its neighbor Switzerland. But that doesn't mean it's necessarily cheap. I will do a separate video on travel expenses in Austria, which I will link below. Where should you stay in Salzburg? Of course, Salzburg has a wide range of accommodation options, from youth hostels to high-end 5-star hotels, so it really depends on your travel budget. Personally, I always prefer to stay in one of the smaller towns and villages around Salzburg and then come into Salzburg for a day tour. The Salzburg region is beautiful and offers plenty of accommodation options, some of which may be cheaper than in the city. Can you get around with English in Salzburg? German is of course the official language in Austria, but you will get around with English very well. English is usually the first foreign language taught in schools in Austria, so especially the younger generation speak English really well. How many days do you need to see Salzburg? Plan to stay at least a day in Salzburg, and at a minimum another 3 to 4 days in the Salzburg region, which is one of the most beautiful regions in Austria. Make sure you also check out my other travel videos on the amazing places in the Salzburg region and the rest of Austria. Definitely check out my video on Hellbrunn Palace, which is only a short 10-minute drive away from Salzburg's old town. This mesmerizing palace and palace garden, with its intricate trick fountain systems, are the 1600s version of Disneyland. In so many ways, Salzburg is only a starting point to explore one of the most fascinating regions of all of Austria, with its many beautiful towns, villages, lakes and mountains. So is Salzburg worth visiting? Well, I would say a trip to Austria without visiting Salzburg and the Salzburg region would be incomplete. It's a must-see. I have been to Salzburg many times, and this alpine region has become one of my favorite travel destinations in Europe. If you are torn between Vienna and Salzburg, and you can only see one, you have a tough choice to make. If you want to experience the majestic palaces, impressive historic landmarks, European metropolitan city life, mind-blowingly rich cultural venues, and the nightlife of a big city including a tour to the Prater, Vienna may be your preferred choice. Check out my video on Vienna and see for yourself. But if you are keen on seeing the mountains, venturing into the Alps, do some hiking, get some fresh air, and visit alpine villages and lakes, Salzburg clearly comes out on top. I hope you enjoyed this Austria travel video on my walking tour through Salzburg, and if you did, please give it a like down below and leave me a comment in the comment section. And if you have not done so yet, please subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell to get updates on my weekly new travel videos on beautiful Austria and many other amazing travel destinations. I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Have a great rest of the day. Bye bye.